Nicole Osmer, welcome to Built to Sell Radio.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Tell me about Health+Commerce. What did you guys do?
We still offer public relations and marketing services to healthcare innovators, so primarily medical device and biotech companies.
Got it. So if I've got a new, knee replacement joint and I want to get the word out there about this knee replacement joint, I probably want to get the word out to regulators and to doctors and to hospitals. I would hire you and you would help do that through PR and paid media. Am I getting kind of roughly right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. A lot of our clients are actually startups. We work with much larger publicly traded companies as well. But that was and still is one of our unique specializations, is working with very early stage. So even at the Series A or earlier.
How did you handle AR? Because I know those startups can be notoriously bad for paying their bills.
Oh, actually, our clients are all venture capital backed for the most part, and they pay their bills.
Gotcha.
We've only had one or two issues with that. Yes.
And how did you get into this business? That's an interesting business to just go out and start.
Yeah, it happened a little bit just by happenstance for me. Actually, I started out in tech PR early career, ended up in-house at a medical device company, which was acquired by Abbott. So had the healthcare experience, about 5 years of healthcare public relations experience when I started working for myself in 2007. I, at the time, had 3 young kids, just wanted more flexibility. My husband was traveling internationally, and I, after our company was acquired, knew a lot of people that had gone to startups. And so I asked one of my friends who had been in marketing, if I were, to be available as a freelancer, do you think anyone would hire me? And he said, yeah, I would hire you. And so that was my first client. And I actually continued to be a freelancer for Abbott for 10 years after that. So I thought it would start out just small projects here and there, but actually developed very long-term relationships with many of my startup clients that grew and were very successful in some cases. So
a lot of service providers get hooked on the freelance lifestyle. They love the flexibility. They love the billing, the simplicity of it. Did you ever consider just remaining a freelancer and not building a business?
I loved being a freelancer. I could have done that if I had chosen to start saying no to a lot of really interesting work, because I was forced to grow. My clients grew and I had to grow along with them. And I also built a reputation within Silicon Valley as being a great resource for medtech companies who were launching or starting to build their brands. And I enjoyed the work and really wanted to help these entrepreneurs. I loved working with them. So I could have done that, but it was just a very organic process to start first bringing in additional freelancers and subcontractors. And then to, I think the biggest leap was hiring my first employee. And at that point, I brought in my husband to help run the operations of the business. So I didn't really consider remaining a freelancer, although I have to say it was never my goal to start an agency originally. But it just was kind of the next logical step for me.
It's fun. It's funny you should mention the first full-time employee being such a fork in the road. I found that as well. As long as you've got freelancers and contractors, that kind of can grow and shrink like an what's that musical instrument I'm using with my hands?
Accordion.
Accordion,
Yeah.
Thank you. But the moment you make the decision to hire that first full-time employee, all of a sudden you've got a mouth to feed, whether you have the clients or not. And the seriousness of the business seems to just go in lockstep up. It's interesting. How is your business model? How did you make money? How did you choose to bill for your services?
We build hourly for the most part, and that still is our model for the most part. We don't really have a lot of retainers. I loved working with startups and had a lot of, experience that was ideal for them, coming from a very successful large corporation and bringing what I had learned to those early stage companies is really valuable to them. And so I always wanted to have a model that was flexible for them. And so they just paid me on an hourly rate. And we found that that's, something that allows them to, we can flex up and down with them as they need us. And so that has worked well. So for the most part, we still continue to bill that way.
Do you remember the first time you considered that maybe you'd built something that could be sold?
I knew I had built something that could be sold from the beginning because I have a mentor who has a very large healthcare public relations and marketing agency who had been trying to hire me and very early on tried to acquire the business or expressed interest in that. And so, that was always a possibility to me. And actually, when we decided to officially, put a different name on the business and started to operate it as a business that could one day be sold, that was very intentional. We didn't necessarily know that we would definitely sell it, although that, my husband and I knew I would need help with building and running a business. That's not my background. I had never even managed anyone. I mean, I had just been working on my own for so long. And so when I asked my husband if he would come, he was interviewing for jobs and would have to, again, be traveling a lot by then we had 5 kids. We actually have 5 kids now. And so I asked him if he would join me and help build the business. And he said, yes, right away. And so we, started out with that sort of end as a possibility in mind.
What were the decisions that you made differently once you'd made the decision to sell effectively, that you were building an asset that would one day be monetized? I'd be curious to know what decisions you made that were different than the decisions you made as a freelancer or as a contractor. Like, can you give us a sense of how you started to think differently? What decisions you made differently?
Well, I think key thing is we never ran it as a lifestyle business. We always, from the beginning had maximizing our EBITDA in mind. And so that was a, critical part of building it with that in mind, and also just investing in the infrastructure for scale. So, both in terms of what we offered our employees in terms of benefits and, paying them very competitively, offering a bonus program and investing in, utilizing ADP. For example, when, we were very small, we didn't need to necessarily use things for a company of much bigger size, and just very, rigorous financial reporting projections, things like that, which I have to credit my husband, he had been working in manufacturing, running very large manufacturing plants for hardware. So he had a lot of experience hiring people, firing people, and, running understanding, everything needed to run it, both from an operations and finance perspective. So.
Yeah, this is a key distinction because a lot of businesses run it as sort of lifestyle cash flow businesses, and lots of the expenses of the owner gets kind of folded in as business expenses. You were different. You were running this like a buttoned up company that was designed to be sold, maximizing EBITDA, professionalizing all the sort of infrastructure. That's helpful for our listeners who are in the throes of that as well. You mentioned before we hit record that you went through a kind of false start or a trial run at selling your company, and it fell apart. I wonder if you could maybe walk me through that story. So let's start with what triggered you to want to sell? I mean, did you put the business on the market? Did you get an inbound inquiry? What was the trigger?
We actually had quite a few inbound inquiries. And, when that first started happening, probably 3 or 4 years in, I knew it was too early and didn't want to be distracted by that.
What made you think it was too early?
Because I had heard and was sort of familiar with the idea that around $10 million in revenue was the time that it would make sense to do some sort of deal. And also we were still able to comfortably scale at that point. We didn't really need any, additional support. So when it just didn't feel right, it felt that, in those earlier years, we could continue to grow it ourselves.
What was magic about 10 million?
I think the valuations are higher at 10 million. And it also becomes the point at which it makes sense for a larger business to look at your business and, to do a deal at all, given the amount of investment that is required from a due diligence standpoint.
What were you hearing, on the street about what your company might be worth if it was lower than 10 million in revenue on a multiple of EBITDA? And then what were you hearing that if you got past 10, you might be able to garner? Like, I'd just be curious as the delta between kind of before 10 and after 10 on a multiple of EBITDA.
I don't really know. And at that time wasn't really thinking about it. I just knew it was not something that we wanted to spend a lot of time on. We were really focused on, finding great people and, continuing to expand what we offer to our clients. And so I didn't spend a lot of time really talking to people or thinking about it. Although I will say that the mentor that I mentioned put me in touch with the owner of a company he had acquired. And it was great to talk with her and just to validate that, yes, it was a little early, kind of understand her experience. And also she put me in touch with someone who ultimately connected us to the investment banker that we ended up hiring. And we did hire him around that time and engage him to start to just, filter these inquiries his way, get to know him. But with the understanding that we wouldn't be doing anything for a little while. But that way I was able to, have a place to kind of direct inquiries that were coming to us. For the first 3 years, no one had heard of us. And then we started becoming a little better known because of the employees we were attracting and the clients we were attracting. And we had applied for a couple of awards, things like that. We were on the Inc. fastest growing companies list, which I think kind of opened the floodgates to a lot of people reaching out to us.
The Inc. 500, or what is now known as the Inc. 5000, was a trigger for getting you on the radar of acquirers.
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you've got this notional idea that if you hit 10 million, the valuations are higher, but you're not getting into the nitty gritty of like what those multiples are. Right. It's just sort of notional, superficial at this point.
Yes.
And yet you're getting a bunch of inquiries. And I think a lot of our listeners are getting inquiries, and it's like hard to know, like cut the wheat for the chaff, know what's legit, what's kind of totally sleazy, and, trying to figure out, you don't want to throw them all away, but at the same time, you get a lot. So you kind of punted them all over to this M&A professional that you hired.
Yeah.
And they did the kind of filtering process. Where does it go from there? I mean, what was the next step?
So we, at that point, started thinking about, potentially running a process at some point in the future. Our M&A advisor, investment banker, put together a buyer's universe for us. We were not in any hurry. So I think we probably frustrated him a little bit.
I was going to say, you're like the worst nightmare for any professional.
Yes. Yeah. We were just we're not in a hurry. So, but we were open to talking with people because we knew at some point we would need to continue to scale. I just have seen over the course of, I've been working for myself now for 17 years. And if you're doing something right, you will grow. And our clients, want us to grow because they need additional services. Our team needs that growth so that there are additional opportunities for the team to continue to advance and grow. So, longer term, we knew it could be a good option for us, but we also wanted to remain focused on what we were doing. So that's why we weren't in a hurry. But over time kind of started, preparing for having conversations with people.
Help me understand something, because growing, you're getting to 10 million. Growing might be 20 or 30 or 40 million. Like, you got to 10 in the space of 7 years. So it's not unreasonable to assume that in the next 10 years, you could double or triple again. What was it about growth that made you think that you should sell? Like, what was it about the idea of like growth, wanting to provide growth to your employees, that, because those two things aren't necessarily interconnected. You connected them. So I'd be curious to know why you connected them.
I think that with an agency of our size, there are some growing pains, scaling, and investment required. We bootstrapped, we were completely bootstrapped. So, and we were always able to hire a little bit ahead, which was great and allowed us to grow. I think you're right that we could have done it, ultimately without a partner. But part of it for me also is just the adventure, doing something new, learning something new. That's what has always, been interesting and attractive for me, as just continuing to have new experiences. And I think after being heads down, just focused on serving clients and, my team for so long, the idea of working with a partner, having, other people to work with and to learn from was interesting to me. So it wasn't only like, yes, it was about scaling and having additional support and resources, but also additional experiences. And, at some point in the future, I think I will do something else. It's not, in the immediate term, but, as I look at kind of the life stage that I'm in, and I love work. I love what I do, but there's a lot of other things I'd like to explore and do potentially as well sometime down the road. So it wasn't necessarily, okay, this is the exit. To me, this was not an end. It was just a new beginning, a new phase of the agency, and a step towards, eventually potentially doing something else down the road.
A lot of our guests also get to the point where their business grows to a size where they start doing the math and realize that they're breaking the number one rule of investment advice, which is to diversify. In other words, they go, I'm sitting on this business that's worth 5, 10, 20, whatever the number is in their mind, doesn't really matter. But they start to do the math and go, wow, gosh, this is a huge proportion of my wealth. And I don't know what the future holds. And did that come up in your mind at all?
Of course. Yeah. Diversifying. Yeah. And especially because my husband and I were both, fully invested in the business and working together. So,
yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you got you've done the math and you're starting to think about this. What happens next? The M&A professional that you hired, did they formally run a process, or
yes,
just take me through this story? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. We had a number of inquiries come in. I learned from you, from your books and from your podcasts and from other sources as well, that, you really want to have more than one buyer at the table. So that was always in my mind, that if we were going to talk to someone, we should probably be talking to other people as well. And we wanted to do it right. So we had several management team meetings. It started out during COVID, so everything was by Zoom in the beginning, which was great. We didn't really need to travel anywhere. We did have, and towards the tail end of COVID, and I think early 2021, I guess, a potential partner that was very interested, that sent us a very attractive LOI, and we met with them in person. They were a PE-backed agency, and looking at us as an add-on acquisition. And that is the deal that we ultimately walked away from. But yeah, so learned a lot through that initial process.
Okay, let's dig in there. So you get an offer.
Okay.
What
Yes.
made the LOI attractive?
Well, the valuation was very attractive. It was an agency with a location that was, a good kind of complementary location. And, great, nice people, very excited about us. And we thought it, could be a really great, potential partnership for us. So
we had Robert Glazer on the podcast probably a year ago now, and he does a lot of work with advertising agencies. And I went back to look at it, and I think he said multiples for agencies with roughly 1 to 3 million in EBITDA were around 4 to 6 times EBITDA. So I'm assuming when you say the multiple was attractive, it was better than that range. Where are we talking north of Robert's range of 4 to 6 times EBITDA?
Yeah, quite a bit north, because in healthcare there is a premium.
Okay, got it. So so it's an attractive multiple, well beyond the sort of standard.
And it was even attractive. I mean, we had been talking with others as well and getting some interest. I think we ultimately had about 8 different potential acquirers.
Wow. Okay.
Across the process experience. And so we had a pretty good idea of our valuation. And this valuation was high, pretty high.
Was it like the highest by a long margin, or was it sort of on the upper end of what everybody else was offering?
Well, it was a very fast LOI. So that was probably our first mistake, was agreeing to it a little bit quickly. So I'm not sure we even got all of the other potential. I don't recall exactly, because that was a couple years ago now. But yes, it was on the high end, certainly.
Okay.
So what we were expecting. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's super attractive. You mentioned it was fast. So you've got these other acquirers sort of circling. What made it so fast for you to sign? Like, why not sort of wait and solicit, LOIs from the other folks? Like, I'm assuming you got pressure from.
Well, I think we did have LOIs from the others as well. Okay. And I wouldn't say pressure, but our investment banker knew this acquirer pretty well. And I think he felt like this is just an obvious, really great deal for everyone involved. This is, for him, easy. And so I don't think he pressured us in any way, but I don't think he certainly wasn't telling us, whoa, slow down, you really should take it slow here. That wasn't necessarily the case either.
Yeah. So. And what was so much of these deals, in particular in service companies, come down to what's your role going to be after the fact. So in this deal that ultimately did not get consummated, what was your role? Was it an earn-out or an equity role, or how were they going to tie you in?
There would have been an earn-out.
Okay.
And I had a 1-year employment agreement under this deal.
And how long was the earn-out?
I think it was more than a year, like a year and a half, something like that.
Like an 18-month earnout? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And 1 year. So. And do you recall what proportion of the overall deal was at risk, so to speak, in an earnout?
It was quite a bit. I don't recall a proportion, but it was quite a bit. And that's one of the reasons we ultimately decided to walk away, because we just realized that the risk for us, not only with what we were confident in our own business, but we lost a little bit of faith in their business. The diligence process really dragged out a lot longer than we were comfortable with.
I want to get to that.
So,
but before, let me just understand. So the structure was like they kind of teased you or tantalized you with like a very high valuation, higher than maybe market at the time. And then the 18-month earnout was a significant component. Would it have been, best to your recollection, sort of more than a quarter, less than a half of the overall consideration? Or around a quarter?
I think I've blacked it out of my mind. I don't remember, but it was significant and it wasn't easy. It was a goal that would have been, I think at the time too, the economy had softened. I don't know if you remember, like around in the summer, everyone, I think, was finally starting to go to Europe again, and things just got really, really quiet. So, and that was right around the time we were supposed to be closing the deal. And we just realized, there's things we're confident in our abilities, but there will be things that we can't control that, could impact the ability for us to make that earnout. So that was one of the factors that started to give us a little bit of pause.
And the earnout traditionally is tied to earnings. In other words, you've got to hit an earnings threshold in the future, profit. Was that the way they structured it, or was it tied to revenue or some other? It was
in their case was tied to earnings.
Earnings. Yeah. Okay. So there's this big bogey 18 months down the road. If you hit it, there's an extra payment. And if you add the downstroke, the upfront payment plus the earnout payment, it was a very significant valuation, higher than you thought it might have been worth.
It was, I'm definitely on the high end.
Yeah. And so you decided to sign it.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that as part of this signing, there was what industry insiders refer to as like a no-shop clause, right? Where you can't keep negotiating with the other 7 suitors, that you've got to sort of get engaged to this one firm. Did they have that no-shop clause in there?
Yes, they did. Although at the time there weren't 7 other suitors. That included kind of the second go around. So
okay.
But we did have other people interested. So yeah.
And in signing that, were you mindful at the time that the deal was about to change, or was it just you're signing hundreds of things a day? It's just another thing you're signing. Like, did you realize the significance of signing that LOI?
We realized that we would. Yeah, I mean, we understood what we were signing. I think we didn't realize that we would lose so much negotiation power when we signed it.
Tell me what made you lose negotiating power. Just walk me through that experience.
The first thing we realized was that it should have been clearer in the LOI what the tax structure of the deal would be, because it was much more beneficial for us for it to be a stock sale. And so when we realized it was going to be an asset sale and tried to go back to the PE firm and say, hey, this is a significant difference to us, they were very firm that they were not going to do anything to make that better for us. and so that was, disappointing.
And for folks who don't know the difference between an asset sale and a stock sale, do you feel comfortable just describing it in layman's terms, what the difference you and... Go ahead.
Yeah, I can describe it from what I understand, which is absolutely probably not accurate. But we had, it really comes down to the income tax, state income tax for us. And we had actually moved from California to Idaho. So we had a lower income tax rate. Part of the reason for the move, not the sole reason, but one of the reasons was the, better tax rates. And essentially, by doing the deal as an asset sale and not a stock sale, it wouldn't have mattered. We could have been in California. So it, really has to deal with your sources of revenue and where you live. And so in some cases, it might be better for people to have an asset sale if they, are living in one place and doing business, in different states. But for us, we much preferred doing a stock sale.
Yeah, for sure. And I would just encourage everyone listening to this, regardless of where they are in the world, engage a professional, talk to an advisor about the tax implications of an asset sale versus a stock sale. It may have material impact, as it did in Nicole's case, on the after-tax proceeds. And so you want to know that up front before you get too far into a negotiation. So that's a super big learning. The other big difference between an asset and a stock sale, of course, is when they buy your stock, your shares, they're inheriting your liabilities, right? So any employees who you had in the past can come back and sue them now as the owners of the stock. Whereas if they buy the assets, they're just buying literally the assets, not the incurring liabilities of that business on an ongoing basis. So again, I'm not a lawyer. Talk to a lawyer in your own jurisdiction, but that's my understanding of a couple of the big differences. Okay, so you get into it very early on. You're like, wait a minute, they want to buy our assets. We want to sell our stock. They're not moving on this. What else happened to sully this relationship?
It was clear from the nature of their questions that they really didn't understand our business.
What kind of questions did they ask that would make you believe they had no clue? Like, give me like a specific example of the question they asked, and you're like, oh, this guy has no clue.
Well, I would say the biggest thing is that our clients are, large healthcare companies or small healthcare companies. Their needs fluctuate. They may have an FDA approval. In some cases, they have clinical data that is not favorable for them. And overall, as an industry, being in biotech and medtech, it is a very, very healthy, attractive, industry. And there's plenty of work out there. We've never had a problem finding work. And I know from my own, consulting practice for 10 years, and then plus the 7 years of running the business, that if you have great people and you do good work, you will find the clients and the work will come to you. They were very, very concerned about where, when we were talking with them in July, they were asking us what our revenue would look like in January and which clients we just, any indication that a client might leave or something might happen was, just like very concerning to them. And so, we tried to help them understand kind of that nature of our business. And of course, I understand they want monthly recurring revenue. There's different things that, companies look for.
Sure.
But it was clear that they needed a level of certainty that we just were not able to really provide to them.
Yeah.
Just by the nature of our business.
Yeah, they want to know your pipeline in Q2 of next year. And you're like, this is like shooting fish in a barrel. It's easy. If you do good work, we'll find the clients. And they're not buying it.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's possible. They're out there.
Yeah. No, I didn't mean to discount, but you'd never, in all the years you'd run the business, you'd never struggled for clients. So you were like, why?
No. Yeah.
Got it. So where does it go from there? So you're starting to get the assets versus stock thing is kind of a bummer. And then they're asking you these questions that are making you think, man, they don't really get what we do. What else happened?
Initially, the LOI period, I think, was 60 days. And, the expectation was that due diligence would be relatively quick and that we would be closing within that, maybe not within 60 days, but soon after 60, 90 days. In reality, they just seem to be dragging their feet. Things are moving very, very slowly. And, they say time kills deals. And I would say that is true. I think over time, I didn't see as many synergies as I would have liked to have seen with them as far as work that we would kind of share or refer back and forth. And we just lost faith with them. And especially in the end, because they did end up, retreating basically at the very end. And after several months of going back and forth through due diligence, when we were delaying making business decisions that we needed to make because we were, expecting the deal to close. And we just basically said, this is, especially, after they lowered the valuation, it just became, much less attractive and felt riskier. And we did lose faith in the health of the business that was acquiring us as well. Because we tried to do some reverse due diligence, and the level of information that we were provided about the health of their business versus the amount of excruciating detail that we had provided seemed extremely slim and not very, didn't inspire a lot of faith. We were pretty worried about that, especially because we would have been significant equity holders in that business. And I was worried about the just happiness of our team joining that. Really, a lot of it was around, is this really truly going to be a great fit for our team? And that started to be a big question mark for me too.
I've got so many questions here because this is such important information for our listeners to understand before they go into a deal. So you used a term that maybe some people have not heard before, retrading. Just describe what that is and what impact it had on the deal.
Yeah, they essentially needed to get I don't know, board approval to close the deal, or bank, a debt from the bank. Or I'm not an expert in private equity, but they came back to us and said that they would need to. I think they lowered the valuation, and they also, I think, potentially extended the earnout period or something like that. They essentially changed the deal significantly at the very end. And looking at what we could confidently, guarantee we were going to take home, the 5-year non-compete, the fact that I had only a 1-year employment agreement. It essentially made it a very, very easy decision that this was not a smart thing for us to do.
How much did they drop the guaranteed proportion during the retrading process? I'd be curious. Was it like 10%, 20%, 50%?
I honestly don't remember. And I don't even know if it even absorbed for me, because at that point, there's just the fact that they were doing it, changing something, was enough for us to say, we're not doing this.
Interesting. So,
and we had a call around the 4th of July with them when we were on vacation with our family and spending a lot of time in temporary meeting space trying to close the deal. And at one point, we just said, we need deal certainty that this is going to happen. And they hadn't even met with their bankers or whatever at that point yet. So when it came back that they were going to be changing things, we just immediately said, no, we're not.
Interesting. So it was just the fact that they were trying to trade, as opposed to the size of the retrade that caused you to be
that really was probably the significant part of it.
You also used a term called reverse due diligence, which is evaluating the acquirer as much as they're evaluating you. I've got a couple questions around that. So in addition to the earnout, it sounds like they were asking you to roll some equity, some of the proceeds of the purchase into equity in their company. Is that right?
Yes.
So that was above and beyond do you remember proportionally what size of an equity roll they were asking for?
I think it was probably 20-25%, something like that.
Okay. So it's a significant amount of money that they're asking you to invest in them. And so you're doing diligence. And was there one question that you can point to our listeners might ask a potential acquirer, particularly a private equity backed acquirer, that revealed to you that these guys aren't as stable as I would hope them to be? Is there one or two questions you could guide our listeners to ask?
Well, we just wanted to see the financials of the company, how they were doing so far that year. Were they, meeting, were they on target to meet their goals that they had? And we knew at least one of their potential projects fell through because we did share one client with them that decided not to proceed with them, which is that's fine. Clients come and go.
Mm.
But we were aware of at least one, significant, sizable project that they had lost. And again, it was less around the numbers than about the level of information that they provided to us. They were not very transparent. Let me just put it that way. And so, from my husband's perspective, it was laughable what they provided to us, just not
superficial.
Just not, no detail.
How much bigger, how much more revenue than you did they have? Like, were they a much larger company, or was it a merger of equals? Like,
probably 3 times our size.
Okay.
Maybe not quite.
Out of interest, what was their reaction to your request for their financials?
I don't think it was an unreasonable request. I mean,
sounds reasonable.
And I don't think they also took a long time to get it to us. Like, everything took a long time, which was frustrating too, because we felt completely entitled to ask to see their financials, and it just took, weeks to get it from them. So
how did you go about telling them the deal was off?
Ultimately it was through our investment banker, and we just said, we've, lost faith, and the value is lower. We don't feel that it's a good, we can't proceed.
What was your banker's reaction? Because he had a relationship with this acquirer, and that, I'm sure, was an uncomfortable conversation for him to have.
I think he was as frustrated as we were that it was taking so long. And I think he certainly understood our position.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, to be fair, his relationship was with the agency, not the private equity firm necessarily, although he knew them. But the kind of friendlier relationship was between him and the agency founders that had received the private equity backing to go make acquisitions. And they were really nice people. I mean, and they, it wasn't their fault. So, that was hard. I did feel, badly about that. It was an easy decision to make because it was clearly the right thing to do. But, you don't like to disappoint people. And but it's not uncommon when you've got an operating company who has a lot more empathy for you as an operator, and you just naturally have so many things in common with. And then when a private equity acquirer, investor gets involved, they're one step removed from the operations. They're going to ask all financial related questions with no appreciation for what you're building. And so it's not an uncommon story that things would derail or become overly complicated when you've got a sort of an operating partner who is the person you think of as the acquirer, but then they've got Darth Vader behind the screen, sort of demanding, you retrade, or demanding it be an asset sale versus a share, all the stuff that we hear about. You had put together a little list of things you would coach another founder to do before signing a letter of intent. Have we addressed all those notes that you put together in advance? Yeah, we looked back on what we included in the second letter of intent. I would say, number one, just take your time and have a lawyer look at the LOI. It's important to get outside counsel on that, not just your investment banker, whose motivation is just to get a deal done, number one, first and foremost, but a lawyer. And as many, I think I sent the LOI to, a friend who had sold an agency, just kind of getting input on it, to really ensure that the things that you care about the most are addressed or clarified within the LOI. So it actually, the second time when we did sign an LOI that ultimately was with Supreme Group, we negotiated the LOI for, I think, 3 weeks or so before we signed it. We understood that was something we should do and that we could do. And so a lot of things were already discussed up front. The terms and the valuation in that one were not really the fine points. It was more around the tax structure. I mean, I think, that would be a big thing for us. It was a big thing. We negotiated in that second LOI to have rep and warranty insurance to reduce the amount of the cash that we'd have to put in escrow, which I'm glad we negotiated because that adds time and cost to the deal. And they agreed to that. I think we also had in the LOI that at the end of the exclusivity period that the buyer would reconfirm the purchase price or the valuation or the term, which they did. And we did have to extend that LOI exclusivity period, which was, I'm glad that they did. That gave us a lot of confidence, going into it, that we were on the right track after they had done their quality of earnings report and done, the bulk of their due diligence, that things were still on track. We didn't have to.
That's interesting.
That was, something that was included. And then also just not the details of the employment agreements, but who would have an employment agreement and kind of roughly the length of the non-competes. So those were the things that we included the second time around, which made it, a much smoother process.
Yeah, this is absolute gold, Nicole, for our listeners, because again, many would, the buyer, of course, is motivated to say, let's just get the LOI signed, and then these are all things we'll work out during diligence. This is great. These are great questions, Nicole, but we'll tackle these during diligence. And yeah, that's a great question. I've got to check with my board and get back to you. And they'll give you all sorts of reasons why they can't negotiate it during the LOI, but you did the absolute right thing in the second time around, is getting all of the T's and C's done up front before you lose that negotiating leverage. So good for you. Kudos to you for that and the successful sale or acquisition by Supreme Group, where you're now working and working through your earnout. I'm assuming. Are there any other things that I didn't ask you that I should have asked you about the Supreme Group acquisition? I know we have to be a little bit sensitive about details around valuation and so forth, but is there anything that made the Supreme Group acquisition noteworthy or stand out in your mind that we haven't tackled?
It was just night and day. Our interactions with Supreme were really positive from the very beginning. Not that the others weren't positive. I think everyone we talked to, it was great. I actually really enjoyed it. Just learning from, about other, learning about private equity, learning about other agencies, getting to, talk about our business. There were a few things about Supreme that we really liked. The first thing is just how open and transparent they were from the very beginning, from the very initial meeting. I was really impressed by the health of the business, of the Supreme Optimization, which was the first, company that the private equity firm bought to build the holding company around. I'm sure there's a term for that. But the founder was just very, just laid back, open, had built a very successful business. I went into it not really expecting to be that interested because the business was very different from ours. It is in healthcare. They're a performance digital marketing agency, much earlier stage clients. But we actually are very complementary to each other for that reason. And we do a lot of commercialization, sort of direct to patient, sort of physician patient work, and they're much earlier in at the research stage. Very healthy, profitable business, and I looked at the Glassdoor reviews, all extremely positive. People love working there. Really good culture. The private equity firm is based in Dallas, Trinity Hunt Partners, and just really nice people. Again, very open with us, and so that was a good initial meeting. And then they ended up hiring a CEO who is now my new boss, who had worked for Medical Knowledge Group as the chief, I think, revenue officer, and helped sell that, which is a very similar platform company, holding company that was sold to Novo for $1 billion. So he has a lot. I mean, his whole career has been in building healthcare agencies, and he had already done, once what they're trying to do again now. And really just, had a lot of respect for him, knew I could learn from him, and, some things in common. He lives very close to one of our key senior employees. He's also has 5 kids, just like normal, just people we could relate to from a personal standpoint, and, really collaborative environment, open to ideas.
How's it feel to have a boss again?
People have asked me that a lot because I did work for myself for 17 years, but in a way it's not really that different, because I feel that, each client has in a way been a boss. My team, my employees, everybody, there's always people you're collaborating with or working with. So I actually enjoy it. I think it's fun to have someone to work closely with again.
How did you choose to tell your team that Supreme Group had acquired Health+Commerce? What was that like?
I was able to tell my senior team in person for the most part, which was good because people reacted in different ways. There were a couple people on the team that had very negative impressions of private equity. So kind of working through, why I felt this was different and how it was going to be good. And then others were just excited, could see immediately the potential to collaborate and grow and partner. So that was good because, we're communicators. This is what we do. So I think, the philosophy of encouraging people to become advocates for you within the organization before you tell everyone all at once, I think was a good way to handle it so that they had time to think about it, process it, talk with Tom, our CEO, first, be able to answer the questions from their direct reports. The day of the announcement, we the day before the press release went out, we had an all-employee meeting already scheduled. And I sent an email that morning explaining, a long email that we had been acquired. And then that was the topic of our conversation during that employee meeting.
You're a PR person, so I have to ask, how did you sort of spin it for employees? What was the positioning you took?
Well, I really think it's what we've talked about here, which is that it will provide, additional support for us to scale and new partnerships and new people to learn from, as well as opportunities for their, our team's growth. And, I think our team really, they see our need for additional services, international services, investor relations, clinical trial recruitment. There's a lot of ways that we'd like to grow. And so they already, kind of can see that. The senior team does. I think the more, the rest of the staff, it didn't really impact their day-to-day very much and still hasn't. I think that was a good message. And something I liked about this deal was that we remain a standalone organization, and we're not, we don't have someone micromanaging our decisions or day-to-day at all. And so for the most part, it's business as usual for most people on the team.
Was anyone resentful?
No, I don't think so.
That's great.
That's great. Expressed it to me.
Now you'll hear about it.
No, I don't think so. No.
Well, that's great. It sounds like you're a great employer, took good care of the people along the way. So no reason to feel resentful. I'm so glad that you shared the story, in particular, the false start, because we learned so much from our mistakes, and you were really candid with sharing that. So I'm grateful for you doing that. Are you up for a quick lightning round before I let you go?
Yes, absolutely. But first I have to tell you one thing I learned.
Sure.
And I knew of your podcast and had read your books and had sort of casually listened to some of your podcast episodes. After that first LOI and walking away, I made sure to listen to your podcast every week because I learned so much from it. And just to have it, hearing from other entrepreneurs' stories was very, very helpful to me. So I'm really grateful to you for what you do, and I've really learned a lot from it.
That's very kind, and it's easy to do with guests like you who are so forthcoming and have such interesting stories to share. So thank you for saying that, but it's really a pleasure to do. So we've covered a few slimy tricks so far, but if you could point to one, was it the retrading, or was there some other trick that a potential acquirer tried to play on you that ended up feeling kind of sleazy?
I have to say, I'm not sure it was a sleazy trick. I think they had reasons that were legitimate. Mm-hmm. I think there were headwinds from the economy and from the other agency that they were facing. And I want to give them the benefit of the doubt that it wasn't a slimy trick. But I will say it's definitely something to watch out for and to protect yourself against with the retreating. Definitely. Yeah. And I think, I've heard other people talk about the very fast LOI, long due diligence, and then retrading. That is what happened with us, that first deal. So it's something to watch out for. Definitely. Fast
LOI, slow diligence, wait for the retrading.
Yes.
Okay, good pro tip from Nicole. Biggest mistake that you made personally that you'd love to have a mulligan on, you'd love to have a do-over on?
I don't think I'd do anything over because I'm so happy with how things turned out and I learned so much from it. But I do think the do-over would just be taking it slower with the LOI, having a lawyer review it, and, just remembering that your investment banker is like a real estate agent and they want to get a deal done, and they're not necessarily there to protect you from every, potential scenario. You really do need to be an advocate for yourself and educate yourself.
Yeah, great advice. And I've referred to it analogously as your M&A professional is going to hit the gas. Like they want to get a deal done, right? Like, and that's part of their job is because they know, sellers are going to get cold feet along the way, and they need to kind of nudge you to kind of move forward. And at the same time, your lawyer's going to pump the brakes, always be pumping the brakes, tell you all the 16 reasons why you shouldn't do this deal. And if you're all lawyer and no M&A person, you're probably not going to do a deal. If you're all M&A person, no, you're going to end up doing so it's nice to have both, but they are doing different things.
And you have to remember their motivations. So the investment banker probably has a target of deals they want to close in the year. The lawyer is billing you by the hour. So in some cases, when I got my employment agreement, rather than just negotiating it through the lawyers, I just picked up the phone and said, hey, can we talk about this? Because I have some questions around this. And I went directly to, the guy that was going to be my boss and said, did you look at this first of all? And what do you think about these things? And
I love it when you say I love it when you say the B word, because you can't really bring yourself to say it. You're like, who's going to be my
yeah. I know it's still such a weird word. Yeah.
17 years on your own.
I actually have a problem being a boss still.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's so funny. What was the emotional high from the sale? Like, do you remember sort of an emotional, like that was the top of the mountain for me?
Absolutely. So after it closed, after the 5-minute meeting, which I did not know was going to be 5 minutes, I was upstairs on Zoom. My husband was downstairs on Zoom in his office, and just going downstairs. And, it just felt so good because it had been not just the deal, but like that 7-year journey together. And, I would say it's the closest thing to like, delivering a child, that feeling of like, oh, wow, like we just did something great, together. So that was really definitely the high.
And so cool that you did it together, right? Like that emotional bond will be there for life, in the sense that you've gone through the gauntlet together and you experienced this incredible event together. I think that's really, really special. You've been generous, very overly generous with your comments about Built to Sell Radio, which is great. Were there other resources, people that you can point our listeners to that would help them think through an exit? Any books that you read or anything that you might share with our listeners?
I think talking to people, and that's one of the reasons why I think the podcast has been so helpful, because it's almost as if you're having a conversation and learning from other people. I have a hard time sitting down and reading a book. I mean, I do have like Adam Coffey's books. I can't say I've read them cover to cover, sort of like page through them. Your books are easy to read, but I absorbing all of that information is hard. So I do think just talking with other agency owners who have gone through the process was probably, and even just, it only takes one to recommend a, investment banker, or to recommend a lawyer, to really find those great resources that you need is so important.
Yeah, that's great. You referenced Adam Coffey's book. For folks who don't know that name, he wrote the Private Equity Playbook. We had him on the podcast a couple months ago. Great interview. He can really help you get inside the head of the motivations of a private equity group, and And just so I think it's always helpful to know, okay, that's the playbook, so that you can decide sort of how you want to react to that. And of course, there's pros and cons to every acquirer, but you can really get inside their head. So,
and that interview with Adam Coffey that you did, I learned so much from that too, and actually sent that aired before our deal closed, and I sent it to multiple people to listen to, including founders that I've talked to, because my new role is to help bring in additional acquisitions into the platform. And so, often you talk with agency founders who they don't understand private equity at all. I mean, I didn't, 3 years ago. And I think that interview is just really helpful, because if people know anything about private equity, it's usually something very negative. And he does a really great job explaining how you can benefit from private equity and what the positives are about being a part of private equity. And so I really enjoyed that interview and found that really helpful.
Oh, thanks for saying that. Yeah, I mean, like him or love him, they are the number one acquirers of small to mid-sized businesses in the United States and most around the world. And so, best to at least learn how the playbook runs, so you can know that, because chances are when you go to sell your company, there'll be a private equity acquirer either directly bidding for your business or backing a company that is bidding for your business. So it's really good to know kind of what their KPIs are and philosophy. And Adam does a great job of cheerleading for that category for sure. Okay, this question is coming. If you've listened to the pod before, I want to know what trophy you bought yourself. You better not let me down here, Nicole, because I want something good. What did you buy yourself? You just sold your life's work.
Well, my husband and I took a little long weekend vacation in Mexico, which was fun, just to relax and decompress after. But I'm not sure it counts as a trophy, but our oldest daughter is getting married this summer. So that is a big expense. It's nice to not have to worry too much about.
Fantastic. Where is she getting married?
Cost of things. In Idaho.
Idaho.
Yeah.
A mountaintop retreat in Idaho, I hope. Sounds great.
Not a mountaintop retreat, but yeah, it'll be really nice.
Spectacular. Well, she deserves. You deserve to share some of those rewards with her, which is fantastic. I'm glad that you shared.
And with 200 of our closest friends, or
now you're setting the bar high though, so you've got 4 others to pay for. Let's be clear on that, right?
Yeah.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time. You mentioned that you're also talking to folks about businesses in the medtech space. Where can people reach out to you if they wanted to kind of connect with you? Is LinkedIn the best? What's your preference?
Yeah, LinkedIn is great. And yes, we're looking to add on additional acquisitions to the platform company. So we were the 3rd company acquired, and they plan to acquire probably 12 more at least acquisitions and healthcare services. So
okay, so you're here to hear if you're in the healthcare services, Nicole can help you think it through. So we'll put Nicole's LinkedIn profile in the show notes at Built to Sell. Nicole, thanks for doing this.
Thanks so much, John. Appreciate it.